Welcome to the CEC Report. It's the 10th of July. I'm Robert Barwick and I'm joined by CEC leader Craig Isherwood. Welcome, Craig.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie.
In this week's CEC Report, Royal Commission into the Commonwealth Bank a good start, but investigate the whole system. And Australia should join nations fighting for economic independence from London and Wall Street. So first, Royal Commission into the CBA a good start, but investigate the whole system. Now, Craig, so I think this is a rather important development. We've finally had an official call at the level of Parliament. The Senate Committee into Banking has called for a Royal Commission into the Commonwealth Bank and ASIC, the regulator of banking, right? And of course, what struck me when I first heard this is a sort of a faint echo or a pale imitation of your long-standing call for a Pecora Commission into the financial system.
Yeah. Just a couple of things here, Robbie, because I think you can't just talk about a Pecora Commission or investigation. This is very good, what the idea, the directionality, but it is a Royal Commission.
Yeah.
What we actually need to have in this country is a vigorous debate in our Parliament about the necessity for Glass-Steagall. I mean, for crying out loud, even the UK Parliament is having a vigorous debate about Glass-Steagall. This is United Kingdom. This is the bank of the home of the Bank of England
and the City of London banking.
And here we are down here. Our politicians are terrified about the idea of proposing a debate about Glass-Steagall
and pretending it's a non-issue.
Exactly. And the point is that why not have a discussion about the re-regulation of our banking system around the principles of quarantining the actual important part of our banking system, which is the commercial banking system, break it off from the merchant and investment sides of the banking system so that we're not having this huge amount of gambling, of speculative debts being basically governing the entire system.
Well, Craig, maybe it's baby steps. I'm certain it's partly due to our influence because you first called for a Pecora Commission in 2009.
Yeah.
Now, and the issue then was the case of Storm Financial, right, which involved Commonwealth Bank, Macquarie Bank and Bank of Queensland, and it was obvious then that all the attention was being paid to the actual managers for Storm, that company, but the banks were deflecting any attention onto them away from themselves, right? So we knew what a Pecora Commission was and we called for that. So anyway, we've now got at least a call for a Royal Commission. It's interesting, Craig, that the Liberal Party have been somewhat shown up by this, and that's not to praise Labor or whatever, but certainly, as party structures, they're pretty, as a collective, these parties are pretty abominable, but we know, we've met many of the individuals in them and they're kind of trapped in a system, right? And they often try and function to the best of their ability. And certainly some of the members of this banking committee are pretty decent people, right? And they're seeing this testimony all the time of the crimes of the banks, and they really want to do something about it, right? They're kind of locked in though to a certain way of looking at it. So, but at least they're trying. That's my point. But anyway, here's the Liberals though. They're happy for Royal Commissions into pink bats, right? Which was a terrible event, but if that deserves a Royal Commission, they're happy for Royal Commissions definitely into the trade unions, right? And that's all over the news at the moment. But when they've been told by a Senate committee we need a Royal Commission to banking, the Liberals are going, no way, we do not want that kind of investigation at all. And of course that wouldn't surprise us knowing the role of the banks in the Liberal Party, right?
That's right.
They get all their money from them, they're effectively owned by them. The thing with the Commonwealth Bank though, and it goes to what you just said about Glass-Steagall and separating investment banking from commercial banking, because in the case of the Commonwealth Bank, what has they've been shown up committing wrongdoing is because investment banking is tied up in commercial banking. Specifically, they had this financial planning division, which is a very big part of the Commonwealth Bank. And when they're getting all these clients and they're giving them this advice, but they're giving them more than advice, they were directing them into very high risk investments, and they were even forging documents to push them into those investments without the clients knowing. The clients are just ordinary people, successful retirees who've got anywhere up to $1 million to invest, right? But they're still just individuals and retirees.
Yeah, they were doing things like, from what I understand, Robbie, maybe I'm wrong, but they were writing in income from pensioners or people who are retired as being the income that could be derived from the increase in the valuation of their property over the next 5 or 10 years.
That's right.
That was actually their
Pretending that's their income.
That's their income.
So someone on $20,000 in actual annual income, they were writing them up as having $180,000 income.
Now, anyone who understands anything about finance knows that that's a fraud there and then.
Exactly.
Right? But this was actually, it wasn't just an individual doing it. This wasn't an accepted practice, which is why there is a need for the rooting out of this sort of systemic corruption within inside the banking system.
Well, I want to make this point. The Commonwealth Bank initially claimed, and still does claim to a degree, that, these were rogue planners, right? But the investigations have shown that well and truly after the Commonwealth Bank knew about this, they were still promoting these so-called rogues. And that tells me these weren't rogues, these were people who were doing a job for the Commonwealth Bank. Now, there's one or two reasons why, or maybe a combination of both. One is because of how profitable it was for the bank, and I'm sure it was very profitable. Two is, though, I have a question, and this will have to come out in an investigation, were the investments that these planners pushing the clients into, were they in some way shoring up positions that the Commonwealth Bank held? And this reminds me, we spoke here about the history of the Pecora Commission a little while ago, Craig. What the Pecora Commission in America, when it investigated Wall Street back in 1933, it focused on the role of National City Bank, which has a lot of similarities to the CBA. It was the biggest bank. And very similarly, it had an investment division that was taking clients of Citibank who had money in the bank. They were encouraging them to invest in other Citibank products, but those investments were shoring up Citibank's own position, right? And so these people, money was being used to prop up Citibank effectively. And is that what's going on here? This is the kind of thing an investigation has to unveil. Now, the Senate committee wisely has also called for an investigation to ASIC. ASIC's the regulator. Now, let me tell a story here. Craig, a few of us here met with someone high up in Treasury a little while ago. And this person claimed to an international guest that we'd brought out from Japan that Australia doesn't just have good regulations, it has good regulators. And he said the good regulators are APRA and ASIC. And he said it with a totally straight face. And of course, he was lying through his teeth, because ASIC has now been shown, it knew this was going on and refused to investigate it. Does that have anything to do with the fact that the guy who's the boss of ASIC, Greg Medcraft, is himself a former investment banker? And you've got to wonder how that works when the system is so tightly tied up like that, where the regulators are themselves the same people that have the same background and the same views as the people they're supposed to be regulating.
And what I found was stunning, Robbie, when our Japanese guest, asked the person involved, you say your banks are highly regulated by APRA. How many regulators do you have going into those banks to check them out?
How many inspectors, yeah.
Inspectors, and he couldn't answer the question.
Exactly.
In other words, they don't have any. It's a self-regulating process. You know, the Fox is in charge. The Fox, in a sense, the banks are in charge of governing how the foxes enter the henhouse.
Yep.
And that's what we're talking about here, about the need for a true Pecora Commission of the style that Pecora did back in 1933. Go to the root cause of the corruption.
And also, you do have to say it's got to go much further than the Commonwealth Bank. I can cite two examples here. Macquarie Bank was also involved in Storm Financial. Macquarie Bank, we have eyewitness testimony of Macquarie Bank in 2005 at a seminar in Sydney that they'd invited Peter Costello, then Treasurer, to be the keynote speaker for. After Costello spoke, they got up and spruiked to all these investment and financial planners there that the next big industry is targeting people who are asset-rich, income-poor, ARIP, by which they meant pensioners who because they paid off their house 20 years earlier, if they owned in a house in a capital city, that home was worth stacks of money. And if they could talk those pensioners into borrowing against the value of their home to speculate in the stock market, Macquarie Bank bragged at this meeting that was a $50 billion windfall to be made from that. And the eyewitness who was there, who's a trained criminologist actually, her comment to herself was, and to people around her, my God, they're going after the pensioners. And of course that's what eventuated. Macquarie Bank was in the middle of that. Macquarie Bank's also big, Craig, in privatisation. where they're influencing the policies because they're big players in things like the Centre for Independent Studies and the Tasman Institute, who write policies promoting privatisations for the major parties. Then the assets get privatised, and then Macquarie Bank comes along and gets paid money to handle the sales. And when I say money, I mean millions of dollars, right? And they also get involved in the consortia that go and buy these assets. So this is Macquarie Bank's role, omnipresent role in this, is really curious and deserves investigating. And of course, Macquarie Bank boasts it has a lot of direct government contacts. And for a bank like that to be that influential, you know, that's the kind of thing that should be investigated. ANZ Bank's role in Timbercorp and the Great Southern scandals, which are a couple of the biggest financial scandals in our recent history, that deserves to be investigated. So it's nowhere near just the Commonwealth Bank. But here's the thing, Craig, they've called for a Royal Commission, and you talked about this already, but Royal Commissions sometimes are called Royal cover-ups. And I think the saying is you never call for a Royal Commission and before you know the outcome.
Well, right? I go back to the 1930s Royal Commission in banking. It was only Chifley.
Oh, Royal Commission. Sorry,
Royal Commission.
Right.
Chifley was on, right? He actually wrote a dissenting report that put the truth of the matter on the table. Is that in any country you cannot allow the banks to dictate the monetary policy of the country, which is what happened in the Depression, particularly through the influence of the Bank of England, Sir Otto Niemeyer, and so forth, whereby there was a credit starvation policy put in place and massive austerity, which led to 33% unemployment and so forth. What was supposed to have happened is the Commonwealth Bank could have opened up its credit making capacity to spend into the economy, which is what was requested by Ted Theodore at the time, and it wasn't done. Now, it was done prior to World War II, and we could see how this was actually a very effective policy. But look, once you have to have a policy like Glass-Steagall, where you have strong regulated banking system, where the commercial side of the banking system is highly protected and regulated, so that people can put their money into the banking system and know that it's safe. And that money is then used for commercial purposes like regular loans, mortgages, again, highly regulated. The other casino stuff, if people want to get involved in that, fine, they can expect to lose their money at some point.
Because it's very hard for a regulator to actually track every single little bit of bad activity. Yeah. So it's better just to have a wall that it can't cross.
Yeah, and that used to be the case many, many years ago, and the problem is that the investment banking, merchant banking mentality has now pervaded the entire banking system, such that the risks that are accepted by people who used to get involved in the merchant and investment banking side of things now pervade the entire system. Yep. And ordinary people don't have a choice in this. So ordinary people get sucked into programs that they should never ever been exposed to.
Yep. All right, well, we've done enough on that, so let's have a break. When we come back, we're going to take it internationally and talk about this at a level of nations fighting for economic justice. Welcome back to the CEC Report. Australia should join nations fighting for economic independence from London and Wall Street. So the Argentina's fight against the vulture funds, Craig, has become a dividing line around the world, and between the nations who want to bow to the banks of London and Wall Street and those who are determined to fight for their sovereignty, right? And it's the principle of sovereignty that's making them want to fight the bankers, not the other way around, right? Because they value their sovereignty. So let's deal with the first lot first, and the epicenter of that's Europe. Europe is completely in the bankers' thumbscrews. So you've got, which we've talked about a lot, vicious austerity is killing the people of Greece and Italy and Spain, etc. What's happened now, Craig, is that the European Central Bank has started pumping out its own quantitative easing, and this is not to help the people of Europe, this is to prop up the banks of Europe, right? And they're doing it even faster than the US Fed, $1.3 trillion a year compared to $1 trillion a year for the US Fed. Now, I don't have much detail on this, but I just want to flag it. People, if it happens, people can remember it. There are Austrian banks that are right now in real trouble. And what's worrying people is that it was the collapse of an Austrian bank in 1931 called Credit and Stoll that triggered the Great Depression, right? And people in London that are worried that this, they've been trying to juggle all these balls of the banks in Europe, and it's very hard to do. And so the epicenter is now in Austria, and they're pumping out this money, but who knows where it's going to go. So that's that side. On the other side, you've got nations that are starting to say, no, we're sick of this technocratic bankers dictatorship dictating what we're going to do. We're going to put the interests of our people first. And of course, Argentina's fight against these vulture funds that was talked about on this program last week, and you can look it up on our website for the details. That is the front line of this. The Argentinians are getting a lot of support in South America and Eurasia. Now, on the 3rd of July, there was a meeting of the Organisation of American States. So that's like every country in the Western Hemisphere, right? From Canada on down to Argentina at the bottom. At that meeting, the acting Foreign Minister of Guyana called for the reinstatement of Glass-Steagall, as you just talked about, and he said he cited that as necessary to end this system of vulture funds like it's preying on Argentina. The Foreign Minister of Venezuela gave a presentation where he showed how the vulture funds preying on Africa kills millions of Africans because they go in there and buy up this debt. In the case of, I think it was the Congo, this one vulture fund bought up $400 million of debt for $10 million and then demanded the full $400 million, right? And that's money that doesn't get spent on food and medicines and things like that. At this, they passed at the end of the session, a resolution in support of Argentina was passed by acclamation, clapping, over the protests of the United States and Canada. The United States insisted that a footnote be added to the statement, noting the US objection because the matter is before an American federal court, and Canada slavishly disassociated from the resolution as well, i.e. Tony Abbott's mate over there in Canada, Stephen Harper. So that was the Organisation of American States. Now, just quickly, the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China and South Africa, and if people can recognise, they're all rather large countries in their own right. They've formed a bloc called the BRICS, and they're having a summit in Brazil next week, and they plan at that summit to announce an alternative to the IMF and the World Bank. So the alternative to the IMF is called the Contingent Reserve Arrangement, CRA, and they want a development bank alternative to the World Bank called the BRICS Development Bank. The CRA will have $100 billion, which China, Brazil, India and Russia are going to contribute to, and South Africa. And the BRICS Development Bank will have a operating capital of $50 billion, and all those member countries are going to put up that money as well. They expect that will expand to $100 billion in 2 years and $200 billion in 5 years, and a capacity of financing up to $350 billion. Now, what that's for is so that poorer countries can go to there instead of the World Bank, and they can say, we need money for development, and these countries will happily lend it to them, and there will be without the kind of onerous restrictions that they get from this Anglo-American dominated World Bank system, right? Now, before I throw to you, and we'll have a break though, I just want to make this point. While this is going on, what's Australia doing? We've just invited, people don't sort of connect the dots here, but we've just invited the Prime Minister of Japan to Australia to effectively go on a war footing. We're forging a military alliance with Japan. That's why he's here, right? This is based on a military alliance with the country that, not to condemn the Japanese for that, but this guy, I have to raise what the Japanese did in World War II, because this guy represents a political faction in Japan that would like to wash their hands of it. And they want to become militaristic again. So we're forging a military alliance with them at the request of the Anglo-Americans. And what's their intention? They see these economic developments among these BRICS countries and the Organisation of American States. That's what's the threat to them. So, Craig, when we come back, I want you to tell the audience, we're going to have a little short history lesson about what was called Operation Juarez when your friend Lyndon LaRouche played a role in the 1980s in giving these countries a plan then to rid themselves of this debt burden.
Okay, Robbie.
So Craig, before the break, I asked you to tell the audience about 1982 when Lyndon LaRouche wrote a plan called Operation Juarez for South America to free itself of the burden that came from being debt slaves to London and Wall Street.
Well, Robbie, this all happens in the context of 82, in the pre-context of 71 when Nixon floated the dollar. We went to the floating exchange rate system. This devastated a lot of the countries of Ibero-America.
Yep.
And there's an example which I like to use from a friend of mine, Dennis Small, in the United States. He talks about bankers' arithmetic. And I've got a graph here of what people have to understand, what these countries were dealing with, over this period, from 71 all the way through to 1998. Now, bankers' arithmetic works like this. In Brazil, from 1980 to 1998, Brazil started in 1980 with $72 billion of foreign debt. Over the period of the next 18 years, it paid back 146 billion. So it paid back more than twice the original debt. And at the end of it, it ended up with a debt of 231. So 72 minus 146 equals 231.
It tripled. By paying back double, its debt tripled.
That's bankers' arithmetic. And this is the sort of system that Mr. LaRouche was intervening on. And what he was saying is that this debt is unpayable. And they want to create a debtors block, which are the major countries of Ibero-America, that's Argentina, Brazil, and Mexico, in order to force the real terms, favourable terms, that these countries can actually develop credit systems within their own countries and actually deal with this debt.
Yeah, they threatened a collective default.
A debt bomb, in fact, right? And unfortunately, the only country that went with this was, in the end, Lopez Portillo. In 82, he announced Operation Juarez. In Mexico, he announced Operation Juarez, which was to nationalise the oil industry and to literally fight for the sovereignty of Mexico. And if the other countries had gone with it, then, of course, they could have completely transformed the global financial system at that point, because it was at the point of implosion.
So, because the debt bomb idea, the term debt bomb, that was LaRouche's point, that one country on its own couldn't stand up to him. But if all the countries collectively said, okay, we're all going to default, his point was that would have brought down London and Wall Street.
Yeah, that's right.
That would have brought down the system.
So they were
use it as a weapon.
Incredibly powerful bargaining system, but you had Henry Kissinger at that time running around frantically all over Ibero-America. I don't know what he was doing in terms of threats or whatever, but in any way, Argentina and Brazil, I believe, backed out. Well, they did back out, and this left, unfortunately, Lopez Portillo.
Well, it was also tied up, remember, with the Falklands War. Whereas that was an idea LaRouche had. He was the British asserting their colonial rights to what's really Argentinian territory, it was a bit of a mess politically.
But you can see now with this new idea coming with the BRICS, exactly the same idea of a collaboration around sovereign economic development, of making the debt subordinate to the development of the countries, right, independent of the dollar-denominated banking system in the world. Now, this has the potential of bringing down the US dollar, bringing down the global banking system, but in a sense, it puts in its place a different system. This is why it even highlights to me the need for Glass-Steagall. We've got to have a highly regulated international banking system based upon strong commercial banks, national banking in each country, and then profound, large-scale infrastructure development projects. You've got to have a Glass-Steagall proposal with those other two elements in conjunction with what the BRICS countries are doing. Otherwise, it won't work in and of itself.
Yeah. Now, Australians, Craig, have a very distorted view of the world. The reason we cover subjects like this is because otherwise they'd have no idea what's going on. But these are the events that's shaping the world as we know it right now. And you've got countries like Russia and China signing on one side versus America and Britain. And that's why there's so much tension. But anyway, stay tuned for more of this, and we'll see you next week for more of the CEC Report.